All right, so this lecture is going to be on feudal Europe. And before I get into the structure of feudal Europe, what I want to talk about is one of the reasons why the system was created in the first place. And that was this specific threat that I have outlined right here, the Vikings. The Vikings were bands of essentially, pirates, raiders who came into European society after the fall of the Roman Empire and would attack towns suddenly and, steal a bunch of their stuff. They came from the north, from the modern day countries of Norway and Denmark and Sweden, and they had the best ships of their era. They were able to go really far upriver. Their boats didn't sink very far into the ocean, so they were able to attack in unexpected places. They were able to attack towns that were far from the ocean, that were just on a river, and thought that they were safe from invaders, but then all of a sudden the Vikings would attack and take all their stuff. All right. This is an example of one of their ships that's in a museum today. One of the reasons that the Vikings did so much attacking was because Christianity never made it up that far north into Europe. So the Vikings still worshipped, many gods. They still worshipped Thor and those kind of people that they make the movies about now. They were still polytheistic, and they still felt that they were very apart from the rest of Europe. So a Viking didn't really have any bad feelings about raiding and attacking the Central and sort of Southern Europeans because they didn't feel like they were one with them. They sort of felt like they were different from them. All right. This is a rough map of the areas where they attacked. The Vikings were not a politically unified group. There wasn't like an emperor of the Vikings. They were like a bunch of different little bands. There was, Scandinavia was divided into like 100 different little kingdoms. But the effect they had in Europe was devastating. They really troubled a lot of the Europe's coast and a lot of the river cities, enough so that Europe started making a new social safety net, a new structure to defend themselves from guys like this. All right. And so these attacks, this sort of feeling of instability, this feeling of insecurity, leads to the creation of the dominant social order of the day in Europe, and that is feudalism. So feudalism is complicated. Essentially what it is, it's a system, social, political, and economic system, in which lords grant to their vassals protection. Vassals in this case means anybody who is sort of getting the protection, anyone who's on the lower part of the social pyramid, anyone who owes their loyalty up. And people would give up sort of some of their freedom, right? They would give money in taxes, they would give their loyalty, in military service to their lord in exchange for the lord giving them land. So in a nutshell, it's like, if I'm the lord, I own the whole classroom, I own all the land, but I give you a bit of that land, right? I give you a little square of it. You can live on that square, you can, farm there. I let you live there, and in exchange for you living on my land, you will serve in my military if I ever need you to, and you will, give me, lots of taxes. And then another thing that you get in the deal is that if you're attacked by Vikings or, by the next class or by whoever, I pledge that, I'll protect you, right? I'll send in my knights and everything to protect you. So it's this real sort of formal system. The picture that you see here is someone pledging their allegiance to a king. So this is a vassal, the guy kneeling, who is pledging his fealty, pledging his, loyalty and obedience to the king. Key to making the whole feudal system work were the knights, right? They were the enforcers, the warriors of the ancient feudal system. They're a lot like the samurai, as you probably know from the DBQ that we've been doing in class. They were, they would fight on horses, they had armor that got increasingly sophisticated as the Middle Ages went on, and they were guided by a code just like the samurais were, except their code, instead of being called Bushido, was called chivalry. And chivalry just meant, again, that you were supposed to be honorable towards your opponents, honorable towards the weak and the defenseless. It's a word that's still with us today, and it means a lot of those same things. The knights were very busy when it would come to wars, but they weren't always using their talents for war. Sometimes they used them for things called tournaments, which you guys should remember from our medieval times trip. Tournaments would just be sort of almost like sporting events that they would put on for the kings, for the lords of the areas where the knights would compete with each other. I think the rest of that pretty much goes without saying. One other thing I'd like to say about chivalry. This code really was how these guys lived. For instance, if two knights fought one another and one defeated the other one in battle, they would, take them prisoner, but then after they took them prisoner, they would treat them very nicely. If they could hold them as a prisoner, they would, put them up in a house and stuff. They would treat them very nicely, and they would probably hold them for ransom, like demand a ransom from their family, because knights were usually rich. It even would get to the point where if a knight would capture a knight in battle and he couldn't hold him at his house, prisoner, he would release him. He would say, okay, you go home, because I can't hold you, but in 3 months' time, then I'm going to be able to hold you. So in 3 months, come back, and I'll take you prisoner then. And the code of chivalry says that in the meantime, you can't fight in this war because I've captured you. I've sort of tagged you. And knights would do that. Knights would uphold those sort of agreements, which is sort of a strange thing when you look at it in our mindset, but it's how they lived. All right. Last but not least, the aristocratic women at this time, the women of the Middle Ages who had money, who were the ladies of the castle of the time period. They didn't have a ton of formal rights, but they were expected to be in charge of the castle, in charge of all of the lord's affairs when the lord was away at war, which happened a lot. So in actual practice, aristocratic upper-class women of the time actually did end up having a lot of rights and a lot of power, because while their husband would be away, fighting in France or fighting in England if he's from France, they would be in charge of the castle while they were gone, which again would often be for a while. So while they didn't have a ton of formal rights, they actually, in actual practice, did have a lot of responsibilities at the time. All right.